Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Syed.
Good morning.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good day.
Okay, so we are just getting ready to start here, but I do thank you for making the time to come this today. I'll try to stop saying this morning, even though it's morning here. But to Diversity in the Classroom, this is our session from the LITE Center, and it will have ideas to foster inclusion practices in the curriculum. And we have our EDI committee panel, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves a little more as they take over. But we do have Dr. Ziade, Professor Suij-Ojeda, and Professor Sorensen, who will be leading today's panel. I do ask that if you are not talking, that you would mute yourself. That way we don't have any feedback or other noises with the amount of people that we do have online today. So thank you again for attending, and I will pass this off to our panel.
Thank you so much. I'm going to be the first one introducing myself. I'm Professor Evelyn Suij-Ojeda. I'm part of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, and I'm also a proud MA-TESOL program faculty. Professor Sorensen and Professor Ziade have been working a lot to put this panel together, and we really hope we get to talk a lot about what equity, diversity, and inclusion means, to reflect on our own biases, and then to find ways to foster inclusion, equity, and diversity in our classrooms. So thank you so much for attending, and I would like my other two panel members to introduce themselves.
Well, okay, I guess I'll start. My name is Professor Sorensen, and I am a cultural studies PhD student at the University of Claremont. So we work with all kinds of issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's built into the curriculum, and it's been a pleasure to work on this committee. So I serve as the committee chair, and we're really excited about today's panel.
Well, hello, good morning. I'm Professor Ziade, and like the other colleagues, I'm excited and I'm happy to be on the committee. I do also deal with diversity issues, and we have, especially at the university, we have a diverse students and diverse faculty. So it's very important to understand the people from different backgrounds. And that's basically it. I'll turn it over to Professor Sorensen.
Okay, so let's begin. On the agenda today, we're going to start with just defining some terms. What do we mean by equity, diversity, and inclusion? Then we'll go into talking about self-awareness, how to reflect upon our own selves before we interact with others. To talk a little bit about emotional intelligence, and then we'll move on to the main section on inclusive education, ways to embrace equity, diversity, and inclusion in your courses, right? So how does this work in the classroom? So let's talk terms. This is one of my absolute favorite cartoons for equity, diversity, and inclusion. We have all very, very different animals, and they all have to take the same exam. Please climb the tree. What kind of issues are going to come up, for example?
Well, you have several of them that don't even have claws or paws or anything to be able to climb it. Poor fish, he's totally out of luck there.
Right, the fish is in real trouble, right?
And the poor elephant, he's so heavy, I don't think he'll make it up at all. He's heavy.
Right, so is this fair? But what is this an example?
Not at all.
Right, it's not fair. But what is it a typical example of? What word would we use to describe test?
Diversity, different type of audience here.
Yeah, right. It's very diverse. We have a completely different, everybody in the audience is different.
But it's not inclusive. So it's inclusion is the issue, or non-inclusive, because everybody can't make it up the tree safely.
Okay.
Different knowledge, different background. So everyone have different ability to do this task differently. Someone is in higher level, someone is 0.
Absolutely. So one of the terms that right now one of the terms that we often confuse is equity. We confuse it with equality. And so this graphic kind of shows us the difference between these two concepts when we're talking about issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion in particular. So we see in the top portion, right, equality is giving everyone the same tools. But what's the problem here with giving everyone the same tool?
Well, they have different capabilities, so it doesn't necessarily help them if you provide them with the same tools, because the prerequisite is different.
Absolutely. So that's why in
the same tool won't work for everyone. So if everybody has different ways of learning, then that tool might be difficult for each individual person. It's not like a cookie cutter approach.
Yes, absolutely. So that's why we talk about equity. We talk about how do we get everyone doing the same activity. So then we see that we give them different kinds of bikes, right? So for different kind of learners, for different people with different backgrounds, they get maybe a different set of information, they get additional information, they get a different activity, they get, and so this graphic just kind of quickly shows us, so as we're talking, sometimes these terms get confused. And so just to kind of set the record straight on what we're actually talking about, we deal with how to bring equity into the classroom, not just the cookie cutter approach of equality that has been traditionally used, which we saw in the example of the test with all the animals. Diversity, one of the things that, you know, when people ask, what is diversity? Most people go directly to, oh, different cultures, different languages, and that's absolutely true. But one of the things that we wanted to stress is that it's so much more than that. Diversity is often hidden, right? We can't always see the different ways that we're very different from one another. And so sometimes just lumping in different nationalities or different languages doesn't really cover all the different considerations that you would need when talking about diversity. So, so we see the different puzzle pieces here. We have thinking styles, we have experiences, culture, job levels, physical abilities, sexual orientation, perspectives. All of these things, even age, right? All of these things make us very, very different people and give us a very different life experience that makes us unique and gives us a certain approach to every single situation in life, not just the classroom, right? But it's far more than just nationality and language, because all of these different factors inform who we are as an individual in the larger society. So, oh, I lost a slide. It's all right. So inclusion, if we look at all of these different issues of or instances of diversity, how would we describe inclusion? Not a rhetorical question.
I would say it's just a way to try to include, well, it's self-explanatory, but to try to engage as many as many as possible from a diverse population that you have, so there will be a common ground that everybody feels that they're part of this action or endeavor that you try to engage in.
All right. Yeah, in the chat, we also have Professor Higgins said, drawing everyone to participate into achieving the same goal. Any other ideas? Professor Corwin said it's about involving everyone through differentiation.
It's also about celebrating those differences.
How would you go about celebrating differences in a practical way?
Well, that would mean, I would think, you know, just learning how to live together and learning the differences amongst each other, and looking at them as more strengths, like a strengths-based approach, as opposed to the person is different and so you're repelling or against them. So that's just kind of how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dr. Syed said, be mindful of a diverse crowd, and yeah, acceptance of differences I'm seeing, awareness, right? All of those things are right on point. And most of them are what we're gonna talk about today. So what I liked about this graphic in particular is that it shows us all the different aspects of diversity, but at the same time, it shows us that they all serve a purpose and they all come together to form the larger picture. If you were to remove any one of these pieces, the puzzle would not be complete. And so this is a kind of a visual representation of what inclusion is looking to achieve, right? We use each piece of diversity to bring in, to make a whole product, to make a full classroom, to make a full discussion, a full society. Yes, Dr. Tano, you raised your hand. You're welcome to ask a question. Okay, great. So our first activity that we're gonna look at today is to kind of get us thinking, gearing towards our next section on self-awareness. Some of the questions that I'd like you to start pondering is, what are some elements of your identity that you feel are very obvious to other people? What elements have made you different or unique? And are these in a good or bad way, right? How do you perceive them? Have you ever felt discriminated against because of one part of your identity? Something to reflect on. And if you have a choice, are these elements that you are less comfortable sharing about yourself? And what do you find yourself censoring or filtering about your identity? So it kind of, these questions just get us thinking a little bit about what our identity actually is. I did this activity a couple years ago, and I was shocked at how kind of stumped I was at identifying my identities. So one of the things that I'd like to point out here is that some elements of our identity are very obvious, and others are very hidden, and that's something that that I'd like us to start thinking about. So here we have one of my favorite activities that I bring into my sociology class, for example, to get us thinking about how to analyze ourselves. On the outside of the man, we would write our external identities, the things that are obvious to others. And on the inside, we would write the things that are internal, the things that are hidden and not so obvious, that you have to come into conversation and relationship with, to come into contact and community with, in order to uncover. So I'm going to use myself as an example here, and I highly encourage you we're going to take 3 or 4 minutes. I'd like you to just begin the process by thinking through what your external and internal identities are. You can just jot it down, or you know, you can draw the stick figure. It'll be maybe I'll put the JPEG and a link for you after I finish. So my example, I'm a white woman. Well, I'm white and I'm a woman. I'm a teacher. I'm also a student. I'm female and I'm an academic. But an internal identity that I have is that I'm not just white, I'm German. I was raised by my German grandparents, and I speak German. I lived there for many years, and that's something that's very much a part of me. I grew up in a working class community in an agricultural area. So I actually know a lot about produce. I can tell you everything about lettuce that you need to know. But that's something that you wouldn't know about me that very much informs who I am and how I see the world. I'm also a first-generation college student. And so I come into the academic world with a completely different set of, a completely different lens through which, you know, when somebody says, well, of course, you know, like you're going to work on your PhD. And I said, I don't know what that means. I require a different set of information than my colleague or my classmate whose parents have PhDs, for example. And another identity example that's hidden is that I'm a decision maker. In my home, I make the decisions, and I consult with my husband, of course, but he hates decisions. He's not a decision maker. I am. And so sometimes this very much impacts my interaction with other people, that if you're not aware of might put you off from me, for example, or it could create communication issues. So that's my personal example. I've just kind of thrown a few ideas that you can get some different ideas about how to jog your own thoughts about your identity. So we're going to take, let's take 4 minutes, and I would like, or let's take 3 minutes, and then make some notes about yourself if you haven't already, and then we'll come back, and I'd just like to, if anyone is comfortable sharing, I'd like to hear what some of the things were that that crossed your mind. All right, so go ahead and take 3 minutes. Okay, take one more minute. I'm gonna log in and attach the JPEG. I forgot I was sharing my screen, so it makes it a little complicated. All right, so would anybody like to share some things that that they encountered as they were doing this activity, or things that surprised them?
Yeah, you know what I came up with when you were talking about how you were a white female and then you changed that to you're white and you're female. As a white male, I see that that's always together. And I don't want to be like a crybaby because the white males are being trod upon now, but I just hear that so much. So that's kind of my identity from the outside by many people. And then I also went with something that's a little bit different. It's like my name. It's not what I look like, but it's my name signifies Polish, but I'm not Polish at all. I don't know anything about Poland or Polish culture. I'm an American. And so that's what I exude from the inside, is that part of it.
Thank you.
I can tell you a little bit about myself. I would say I'm a white male too. I try to distinguish between that two. But I'm a teacher. I have a lot of people don't really know on the outset what kind of background I have. My dialect is a little bit different than what people are used to. It's because I have a bunch of languages mixed up. And that's for basically Swedish, Norwegian, Farsi, and English. So it's many different things. But I'm an academician and I'm an engineering professional as well. And a student of life, I would say. That's what we all are. I would come off as an extrovert, I believe, and I'm a decision maker. Those are the things that's popped out to me right off the bat.
Yeah. Did anybody notice that it was more difficult than you expected?
Definitely. I think I needed more than 4 minutes for this one.
Yeah. if we could talk about this all day, really.
We know about you, Professor Hirashiki.
I think the external was easier for me and the internal was more difficult.
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree too. This is Stephanie. I just wanted to say too, I'm not showing my screen because it's way too early for me. But I'm a white female, and you know, the internal was tough, but I think we're more judged on the external in many ways. The only time I've really felt like I was kind of stereotyped was I was a young journalist. I was a freelance journalist in Phoenix. And I was in my 20s, and an editor interviewed me, and she said, I can't, and it was a woman of all things. She said, I can't hire you. You're going to have kids soon, and then you'll leave me. And I'm like, I'm not even thinking about kids. I mean, you know, so I think that was the only time I really felt discriminated against for being a female, but it was like on the outside, it wasn't more personal, like more meaningful stuff to me, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Well, that was also very illegal of
yeah, exactly.
And also your students loves you, Dr. Hoon.
Yeah.
I was in her class one time.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, I'd like to. I've taken up quite a bit of my time, and so I'd like to wrap up and pass this on to Dr. Ziade, who is going to move us on to looking at self-awareness. Thank you so much for your participation thus far. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. So, Dr. Ziade,
thank you so much, Dr. Sorensen. I mean, Professor Sorensen. It's too early for me too. Oh. And good morning, everyone, again. And thank you again for the overview of each term of the equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I would like to concentrate on the inclusion, and which I'm going to refer to as the I moment. So what is the I moment? So this is a moment when we get together, like now we're getting together, and we discuss our experiences, our challenges, our opportunities, and we exchange thoughts, ideas about each other, to know each other, to know more about each other. So the more we talk about inclusion, the more we, our mindset will change. We learn from other people. So we will say, oh, I moment, okay, so this is how other person think. Oh, I didn't know this is how they think, how they perceive that, that point. So how can we encourage a meaningful exploration of our social identity that reconciles both with aspects and enable us to understand of our better understanding of our experiences and interactions with others. So ideally, the I moment should encourage dialogue among different groups of different backgrounds and beliefs. You know, we all came from different countries, from different backgrounds. We have different perceptions. So I'm gonna take this moment and we can talk and share some of our experiences. And that being said, let me, I'm gonna choose randomly someone to give their answers. So my first question, let's see, Professor Konjursky, tell me about more about yourself and your identity, please.
Well, that's good that we just did that other exercise. So now I have some, so without having to think too much. One of the things that I notice a lot, I'm a Toastmaster, and a lot of people will say that I'm an extrovert and that I talk to a lot of people and I do a lot of things, but really a lot of extroverts are introverts. And part of what my identity is shy and not really forthcoming and not very familiar or not very friendly in a small group or in a new group of people. So my identity is, if I know you, you usually think I'm an extrovert because I'm so outgoing. But really, if I don't know you, you don't know who I am.
Oh, thank you. And then we're gonna ask another question. We're gonna see on in this screen, there's more questions. So I'm gonna choose another question and another different person. Professor Hirashiki, can you please tell me why is it important for you to be inclusive?
Well, I think it comes down to caring, thoughtful, and fair, thinking of others, being part of a belonging, being part of something bigger.
Okay, thank you. We have more questions. Let's see. Professor Dr. Sherm, can you please share one unknown fact about yourself? Can you unmute yourself, please? There you go. Thank you.
Unknown fact?
Yes.
Oh, so far I think I am very open. I think 90% about me, everyone knows I'm open person. I'm not hiding inside me. Unknown fact, I am very loyal to my job, to my family, to people I know. And I don't know, unknown fact. I don't think I do have anything unknown fact.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Sherm. So these are questions that we can use when we get together. Maybe also you can use them with your students to know more about them, to see how they are included. How can we include our students together in our classrooms? How can we share our thought together? So next, we're gonna talk about expanding the self-awareness. You're gonna say, who are you? Can you click? Yes, who are you? Have you thought about this question and ask yourself, who are you? Why is it important to know about your the one's identity? Where do you belong? And what is your sense of belonging to a particular group? Who we are, who are we? So understanding the who are we and who we are you, it will help individuals to adjust to different cultural surroundings as they encounter them at work, at home, abroad. So we see a lot of people are different. So that's why it's very good, or it's important to have a better understanding of a culture and social identities, and see what is the impact they have on individuals, on the groups, on the community. So it's very important to develop a greater awareness of your own cultural and social identity and how they impact how they have an impact on us whenever we interact with different groups. All right. So who am I? Well, next, please. Who am I?
Okay.
Typically, you only know a little about me from my resume, because my resume will reveal few things like my education, my work history, and my qualifications. But my resume does not tell you that I am a Lebanese and I speak Arabic and I am a good cook. My food is so delicious. I make delicious hummus. Just kidding. So there's a lot of things that you don't know about me. So let's talk, next please. Let's talk about who are you when you walk into a room, when you walk into the space. If you look deeply here in this, this picture and you examine it and look, what does it reveal? Can anyone care to tell me what their thoughts about what does that tell them? What does it reveal? What does this picture tell you? When you see a person coming into the room, what does it tell you here?
First of all, that person going to the shine or from the shine?
Okay.
My question, I'm asking you. The person going to the shine or from the shine coming?
Well, that's the thing. That's what says, well, it depends. How do you perceive it? What's your thoughts?
Mine?
Anyone? Yeah.
I think the person is going toward the shine based on his steps. If you look to his legs, I think he's going toward the shine, and the people who's going toward the shine, I think they have a good identity, they have a purpose, they have a vision, and they are able to do something more comparing with others. They can share their experience, they can just let the other people involved. So if the teacher going with more confidence, for example, in this room, I think he's able to make difference in the class. Thank you.
You see different people, different knowledge. According to the question, I understand people coming from the shine to inside the room, because question asking this way when you're going into a room. So we can interpret it differently.
Yes, that is true. So from that picture, we can say, the question is, who are you? We're gonna look at this picture, is gonna say, oh, is it he? Because we need to identify that person first. Is it he? Is it she? No, wait. Oh, it's a he. No, maybe it's a she. Well, I don't know. So it's an unknown. That person is an unknown at this moment. But the question is, do you know who are you? Do you know who are we? So let's move on to the next slide and see more about what this picture reveals. So as you enter a space, how do you see yourself? Like, for example, when you go at home, how do you see yourself? Who are you? Anyone would care to tell me what's the description? What do you describe yourself as you enter at home?
Well, when I enter the home, I am looked at as a husband, as a father,
Right.
you know,
Beautiful.
because
Yes.
that's what the expectation is at home.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So are you the parent, the father, the mother, the brother, the son? This is at home. Now let's move on to another space, at work. How do you consider yourself to be at work? You're not the father there.
Yeah, well, at work you are being conceived as a person who is knowledgeable, who is coming into the work to share what he has, you know, and also to one of the biggest challenges today is the listening ability to listen, especially when we're talking about diversity. Listening becomes very important because that opens up the channels of communications that people don't see externally, but they're internal to you.
Okay.
And I think that's very important.
Thank you so much. So at work also, can you see yourself or others see you as an educator, as a doctor, as a faculty, as an employee? So what about when you get together with with friends going out? So they will see you as a friend, a serious person, a funny. So there's different descriptions of you as you enter a different spaces. So that's why it's very important for leaders that they can use the concept of identity group. So, so it's something to think about. You do not feel you are, next please.
I'm just making a point. I think you wear different identities to where you go. Depends on what role you are playing.
Yes. So who are you to others when you walk into the room? How other people perceive you? How do they see you? So how do you feel? Do you feel, for example, do you feel you are belonging? How do you feel belonging in that space? Do you feel that you are not treated? For example, do you feel you're not treated as an organizational insider? You have those unique values in the group, in the work group? Well, though you see other employees and other groups, they are insiders. So then you start feeling, you start sensing that you're excluded from this group. Where if you feel that you are more comfortable, you are more engaging, you feel that you are being treated as an insider, and you also are allowed to encourage, not only to encourage and you retain your uniqueness characteristics within that group, then you feel included. You feel that you are welcomed, you belong to that group. So the term belonging, it has to do with whether or not a person is feeling treated as an organizational insider as well. And then this will help also the core of the diversity and inclusion goals of understanding the differences and improving the inter and the intra-group relationships, and ensuring also the equal opportunities.
I have a comment, if possible. Yes. I think I like the question of who are you and how other perceives you, because I feel like as a professor, we're also being stereotyped as maybe serious or some, very serious, very academic, very intellectual. And I find that in society, I have to sort of bring some humor or some personality. to be seen more as somebody that's like not so academic in my head. And I'm wondering, with the challenges of teaching millennials now, I always wonder whether in the classroom, because of they want to know who you are more as a person these days, whether you should reveal more of your personality or your humor, or you should just keep it, again, very serious, very, you know, professional. I struggle with that because I see in the last 3 or 4 years, there's so much out there in the open as to who we are as an identity, and people are more curious as to who we are as professors. What are our hobbies? Like you said, you like to cook. What do we do on our spare time? Seems like students like to ask these things more of us.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shu. And then from Mira Malupa, she said that this is just reflection on this. How do we differentiate perceptions from judgments? All right, thank you. Next, please. This is the identity tree. It's a fun exercise to do. If you feel comfortable sharing with the groups, you know, your identities, what is your gender, what's your family, where you come from, what is your cultural heritage. So it's a fun, maybe game to play and to share with others about yourself, and then know about the others. So this is a tool that you can take with you and then play and share with other people. We don't have time to do it today. So next slide, it's about who are we really so different? How do you perceive yourself? Are you different from that group? Are you the same? Do you look at the similarities? Do you look at the differences? Well, by the time you have any questions? I see some. Dr. Konjursky, how do you see yourself? Are you really so different from others?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. Do I see myself different from others? It all depends on what environment I'm in. I think like this slide right here signifies that from the outside, again, people look different. It all depends on what your culture was growing up, what people were around you, and can you adapt, and can you know that today it's not, if I grew up in an isolated area where everybody looked like me, can I adapt to that later? Luckily, I grew up in an area where there were a lot of cultures and a lot of colors in the room. So I think I'm okay with that. And so when I'm in a room, to me, I don't look any different than the other people. And I don't care where they are, what they look like, where they're from. We're all the same. If I'm in a room full of professors, that's what we share together. Not that we look different, not that we're from different places, but we're all professors.
Thank you so much, Professor Konjursky. Well, let's see how are we so different. From the research said that there is less than 0.01% differences in human DNA. And based on the Human Genome Project, it has traced all human life back to the African continent. And then racial fluidity is on the rise. So we have 10% of all opposite sex married couples. They are interracial or interethnic. And then also the research reveals that by 2044, by year 2044, there will be no dominant racial groups in the US workforce. Next, please. Since we live in a diversity world, we interact with different peoples with different backgrounds. It's important to know how to understand other people's emotional reactions. And above all, it's important to understand your emotions. How do you react to somebody's emotion? So the EI is understanding oneself and self-awareness and their emotional responses to others. So we're gonna say, what is EI? What is emotional intelligence? Next, please. So the emotional intelligence, I'm going to refer to as EI. It is not your IQ. And it's to possess emotional awareness, to know how to perceive, to know how to understand, to know how to manage your feelings accurately and effectively so other people won't misunderstand you. So here in this model here, there's 4 categories. We have the self-awareness, we have the social awareness, which is the others, and then the actions, the self-management, and then the relationship management. So it's about developing and maintaining relationships. So in order for us to understand the behavior, we have to understand the reciprocal relationship between the individuals. So we need to understand that the role of our emotional intelligence in growing our, myself, yourself as an instrument of change as well. So what is EI? Also, it will help you to recognize the need to maximize your performance. How are you gonna maximize your performance? Well, if we implement that concept within this classroom environment, we will allow students to better develop critical thinking, to have more of a problem-solving skills. Why? Because they will be better informed about their own perspective. They won't have any misunderstanding or misperception or misjudgment. So it's understanding the role of the EI in growing yourself as an instrument of change, as of identifying how these competencies of these 4 categories can play in your personal and professional thoughts and actions. Next, please. From the research findings, there was 427 participants, and they did that. They asked questions about the self-awareness and what is the correlation between the self-awareness and the self-management. So here says that people that they are self-aware, they have self-awareness, it reveals that there's 50% of being able to self-manage your emotions. So, in another word, like if you don't have a self-awareness, you have no chance of demonstrating the self-management. Next, please. Another findings, it also reveals that if you have, what's your correlation between the self-awareness and social awareness? So again, if you are self-aware, that means there's a chance of having a picture of a shark. Next. Oh. Can you hear me? All right. So in this slide, this is a reaction. How do you react? How do you react to this, to that picture? If you have a shark open their mouth at you, how do you react? You react fear. You react. Yes, go ahead.
I would say when we first saw this shark, it was fear. But now that this Jaws movie has been out for a long time, I think the fear has subsided a little bit. And to me, it looks kind of funny.
Okay. So there's mixed emotions here. We have funny, we have maybe fear, we have anxiety or what to do. So when you face something like this, it's challenging. You're there in that moment. What do you do? How do you react? How do you react to this action? How do you control your emotions? So this is all about the EI. It's how to manage your emotions during, whenever you face the challenges, when you have shape, even if you're happy. How do you express yourself? Next, please. Next slide. It's here. If you if you look at yourself in the mirror, how do you read your own emotions? How do you recognize their your impact, the impact on you? So how do you know your strengths? Do you know your own strengths? Do you know your weaknesses? It's very important to assess these things. Are you self-confident? Self-confidence means like, what are your capabilities? So it's very important to think and how to interpret events that produce a particular emotion response or thought. Next, please. We have a fun game here. It's connecting the dots. We have 9 dots, and it's very important. This will tell you how to think. Where are you? Are you thinking within the box or outside of the box? Who played that game? Who knows a little bit about that game?
I've done it before, and every time I see it, I forget how I figured it out, because usually I spend a few minutes longer than I'd want to on this, but I've seen it a bunch. It's really popular.
What's the challenge? What do you see the challenge here? There's a
Without
challenge
taking hand off, you have to connect all the dots.
Correct. This is the challenge. And then you have to draw, not only connect them, you have to know how to connect them. You have to draw 4 straight lines, which goes through the middle of all the dots without taking your pencil off the paper. So this is the play. What it means, or from that game, you can tell, or it helps you. How do you think? You need to go outside of the box to connect the dots. And let's see, do we have a minute? Maybe, okay, we have 1 minute. How about take a minute and then get out a piece of paper and pen and draw the 9 dots and then see how do you connect them. And you know, I give the rules of the game. It's like, you have to draw straight lines, 4 straight lines, which goes through the middle of all of the dots. And don't take your hands off or the pencil off the paper. So let's take a minute and
oh, I blew it. So now in the past, I think we would have practiced. We would have done it over and over and over. But today we have tools. So rather than me trying over and over, I'm just going to Google. Yeah.
That's exactly right. Welcome to 21st century.
I did Google it earlier and I looked at the solution and now I can't remember it. Oh, there you go. Okay.
Few more seconds. How are we doing so far? Are we able to draw a few lines maybe?
Kanjurski's done. He has an answer to that.
You're done?
Professor Kanjurski done.
Oh, okay. But are you done, Dr. Sherm?
I don't want to cheat. I didn't Google it.
Okay. I don't want you to cheat.
Now why is that cheating? We encourage our students to research, correct?
There you go.
Oh, that's exactly. You see how we can interpret different things differently.
Exactly. And this is what's called the I moment.
Dr. Kanjurski, are you going to cite your sources in APA format?
You know, that's a big point of contention that I have because I teach business courses mostly. And all of my 40 plus years in business, nobody in my companies have ever written an APA format. And I want to teach my students practical usage of writing. And so, especially when I teach business writing, I don't like APA format unless we're doing research, but that's another subject.
Any other thoughts? To Professor Kanjurski?
Are you going to reveal the answer?
Not now. All right, then. So this is what I call it the I moment. That's when we start sharing our differences. We start sharing our challenges and what are the opportunities. So here we go. Next, please. Next slide.
Where is the dots?
Huh? It's okay, Dr. Sherm. How certain are you of your identity? Have you thought of this question? Are you sure you belong to that group? Well, let's see. Next, please, I'm gonna show you a short video.
There's no sound.
Yeah, no sound.
So whoever's sharing needs to click the box to share the sound.
Can you hear it now?
No, so if you go stop share and then reshare, but click the box in the bottom right corner.
Bottom left corner.
Oh, from the
left corner. Yeah, when it says share, there's like a little checkbox, share sound.
Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't realize that.
I'm proud to be English. My family have served and we've defended this country and we've been to war for this country.
I'm really patriotic about Bangladesh.
Well, I am 100% Icelandic, yeah, definitely.
This is a Kurdish wedding with my mom in the traditional Kurdish clothes.
We're just proud black, so that's it.
Yeah, I think we are probably the best country in the world, if I'm honest.
Think about other countries and other nationalities in the world. Are there any that you don't feel you get on with well or you won't like particularly?
Germany. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Germans.
You might think they're a little bit...
Particularly India and Pakistan, probably, because of the whole, the conflict.
Because I have this side of me that's like, that hates Turkish people. Not people, but the government. But French?
No. We're just best, it's just fact.
I'm more important than you. I don't know you, but in my opinion, I am strong and I am more important than a lot of people.
How would you feel about taking a journey based on your DNA?
Yeah, I feel very intrigued.
What could you possibly tell me that I don't know?
So do you know how DNA works? So you get half from mum and half from dad, so 50% from each of them, and they get 50% from their parents, and back and back and back. And all those little bits of your ancestor, they filter down to make you. I need you to spit in this tube for me. You spit up to the little black line.
That's a lot of spit.
Right, the story of you is in that tube. What's it going to tell me?
It's going to be, oh yeah, you're French, and wait, your grandparents are French, and wait.
100% Bengali.
Solid Iraqi. I'm Cuban.
You're going to tell me that I'm English, like I've told you.
Jay, can you come down and join us?
I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say.
So you ready to find out your results? Will you read it out to us, please? Wow, look at me.
Oh my God. Oh, wow. Shit, I didn't expect that.
All of them.
Whoa. No.
Caucasus, which was Turkish?
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece.
I'm 32% British.
What?
Great Britain, 30%. Can we 5% German?
I'm Irish.
Yeah.
So I'm a Muslim Jew. Great Britain, 11%. Are you sure these results are mine?
Eastern Europe?
Seriously? Iceland has definitely moved closer to Europe now.
I'm gonna go a bit far right now, but this should be compulsory. there would be no such thing as like extremism in the world if people knew their heritage like that. Like, who would be stupid enough to think of such thing as like a pure race?
In a way, we're all kind of cousins, in a broad sense. In a much more direct sense, you have a cousin in this room. Turn around and guess who it is. Waj?
Yeah. What's that?
Why don't you come down here and meet your cousin?
God, this is hilarious.
Did you know that?
I didn't know I did. This is like, my heart's pounding right now, I swear to God. We met. I'm Jay from everywhere, but the reason is I'm a real man of the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
So would you like to travel to all of these places?
Yeah. Hell yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, thank you. So before I turn it over to my colleague Weija, this is how sure are you of your identity? Something to think about. And my last slide.
Sorry, I'm trying and it's not working. Oh, there.
Well, these are questions to think about. To see where are you? What about your identity? Your identity group. Where do you belong? Who do you belong to? How? So next, please. Who am I? And then this is another activity. It's called the diversity puzzle. Click on it. And then you start with the me. And then you start writing about your ethnicity, the group, gender, and all these things. This is a good also a tool to take with you to practice or to play with your friends, even in class. And then this is how you can know about each other. This is another way, another game, fun game to know about each other. Next, please. And my final thought, this is the answer, Dr. Sherm. This is how you do play the game, connecting the 9 dots at the bottom of the left bottom of the screen. So see, it shows that how you have to go outside of the box. You have to go outside of these dots to understand, to connect, to understand other people, not staying within the box and think. It does not reveal, it doesn't help you much. And with my last thought, my final loss is that you cannot change other people. All you can do is to change yourself. The change starts with yourself. You have to change yourself before you can change others. And with that, I will turn it over to Professor Ojeda. Thank you so much, all.
Thank you so much, Professor Ziade. And I want to share my screen. Thank you, Jocelyn, for guiding the slides, but I want to do it myself. Thank you. Okay, so we have been so far talking about terms, what diversity, equity, and inclusion is. We have also been kind of reflecting a little bit of who we are, our thoughts of ourselves, our biases. And that is true, whether we like it or not, we have biases. And as teachers, as educators, we are role models. And we face the reality of having many students in the classrooms with many, many, many different backgrounds. So what I'm going to talk a little bit now is let's narrow the conversation and let's talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion in the classroom, in the curriculum. And we're gonna start talking about this without introducing inclusive education. So my first question would be, what is inclusive education to you? Anyone? Because we hear a lot about this concept, like, oh, education has to be inclusive, but what is it? Can you conceptualize inclusive education?
This is. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Professor Corwin, I think it's making sure that everyone feels like they're a participant.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
This is Professor Sotilio. I would say that, you know, creative and inclusive classroom has to do with creating an inclusive culture in the classroom. I think inclusivity is a culture, and it has to start from the university with all of the staff interacting with each other, and also that's how it trickles down to the students. So I think it's really like a culture, creating a culture of inclusivity. Of course, that'll be like very specific, like a diversity plan and such, but I really think it's a culture of diversity.
I absolutely agree. It goes beyond the classroom walls. When we talk about inclusive education, we're also talking about staff and everyone who's part of an educational institution. So yes, you're absolutely right. When we talk about inclusive education, we're talking about accepting, understanding, and attending the differences that our students have and how diverse they are. And when we're talking about diversity, we have to think beyond cultural and linguistic diversity, because it goes beyond that. It can be physical, cognitive, academic, social, emotional. And the most important part of or feature of inclusive education is that all of our students need to feel welcome. They need to feel that they belong to that classroom, and they have proper challenges ahead, and everything they do in the classroom is supported, and is supported in a way that they have the tools, the necessary tools to perform and to achieve the academic goals that they want. As in one of the first pictures we saw with the fish and different animals, and we need to make sure that we provide our students with the tools that they need, each one of them need. I know that in paper and it looks very simple, but it's quite a craft. It's very difficult, especially if you have many students, how to get to know them better, how to get to know their differences in ways that we feel like we can help them achieve their academic goals. Now, I want to do a very fast, because I think we have enough time for me to finish my part, a true and false activity. We have been discussing a lot about diversity and inclusion and equity. So I want you to tell me whether you think the following statements are right. And actually, I got these statements from different papers that were discussing the different forums. Online forums, they were discussing about diversity, and they were very interesting. So I took a few of them and I want to share them with you, and I want you to tell me whether you think they're true or false. Equity and diversity is just about ticking boxes. So Hispanic, Latino, Black, white. So it's only about that. True or false?
Not. False. I hope not. Yeah, that's a better answer.
Hopefully not, right? Okay. So how about the following one? Equity and diversity is just political correctness.
False.
False. And why? Why do you think it's false?
Because it's limitation. It's just political correctness. It's not correct.
Okay.
And minimizes it.
Sorry. Okay, how about the following one? Diversity encompasses not only commonly recognized differences such as race, sex, religion, but also less obvious, like individual differences, social style, political belief, and modes of dress. True or false?
Sounds like true.
It is true, absolutely.
I'm not sure about the mode of dress.
Okay, why not?
I don't know. I'd just like a little more explanation on that.
Absolutely. Well, actually, yeah, when we talk about diversity, we're talking about quite a broad concept. So even the way you dress makes you different to other people. And some people are actually discriminated against because of the way they dress. I think that's what it actually means. Now, what about number 4? Cultural diversity is usually found only in wealthy, industrialized nations.
False.
Absolutely false. And that's one of the myths. When we talk about diversity, cultural diversity, first thing that comes to many people's mind is a big, modern cosmopolitan cities. Now, the goal of diversity is to erase individual differences from our minds, workplace, or society.
False again.
False.
Absolutely false. And why?
Because no one trying to erase anyone's individual differences.
It's actually to enhance.
What?
If anything, it's to enhance the differences within our society so that we can.
But we're trying to do with everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the last one, research clearly shows that language determines thought. And of course, I needed to include this because I'm a language educator. So what do you think?
True.
Absolutely true. Which means that if you have a classroom with 20 students, and out of those 20 students, there are 10 different home languages, you will have 10 different ways of thought. So, and that's very challenging for a professor. But that
actually, even though from 2010 with the same language, even they have sharing the same language, they have different thoughts.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. And we at Westcliff University, I think what we face the most is cultural and linguistic diversity, and it is so important to be in line with what the research says nowadays concerning that, because it will make us understand how people and how students react to certain activities we develop in the classroom, and we can anticipate problems, or I'm not saying problems, situations that can come up in the classroom. Now, I wanted to show you this poster that actually went viral on Instagram, and it has to do with student differentiation. We always talk about differentiated instruction and how challenging it is, but how necessary it is in the classroom. So, and it has to do with equity, giving students whatever they need, not giving everyone the same, but give them whatever they need to accomplish their academic goals. So it says that fair is not always equal, and I really like the analogy here that teaching is like, being a teacher is like being a doctor, and that is true. A doctor has, they treat their patients one by one. We don't do that, right? We have 30, 20, in my country, Venezuela, maybe 50 different students in the classroom, and they have 50 different needs, and you make sure that you need to meet them all. And sometimes we end up doing the same activity and the same for everyone, but that's not really fair. So what we need to do is to know what our students are, the differences that our students have, to get to know them a little bit better, so we make sure that we give them whatever they really need. Now, when we talk about student differentiation, we said before that it has to do with age, with race, with gender, with religion, disabilities, personality, socioeconomic status, educational level, and life experiences, and many other differences. And it's important to know this because even, and now especially in an academic setting, we need to think about the educational level of our students, or the educational background. Professor Jocelyn and I were having a conversation while preparing this webinar about how that is so important. Sometimes we assume students should know something. But what we don't know is that the educational background they have, and whether they were actually provided with an opportunity to learn whatever we thought they needed to learn. So we need to keep that in mind. Now, why do you think we need a diverse and inclusive classroom? Right, but let's focus this conversation on our Westcliff University classroom. So let's contextualize this conversation. Why do we at Westcliff University need diverse and inclusive classrooms?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is the legal aspect that wasn't mentioned as yet. I mean, inclusion is a legal right, especially, you know, for people who have disabilities. So, I mean, just to throw that out there, that needs to be said, like it's a legal right.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
I don't think Westcliff University need exclusively diverse students. We are organically diverse university. We are diversified university. It's organic. It's naturally. Exactly. It's not because of we want or we need. We are.
Sorry. My question was if we need classrooms. I know that we have diverse students. It's a fact. But do we need inclusive and diverse classrooms? And when I talk about classrooms, I'm talking about also the decisions we professors make in the classroom.
Because
the way we approach.
We have different students from different countries, different languages, different culture, different mentality. Yeah. As you notice, with different background of education and experience, that's why we need to be.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's part of Westcliff University's mission to have a diverse classroom, yeah. But I think the professors these days have to be really proactive in making the classroom diverse, because everyone's on their phones. I mean, a lot of students, they're on their phones during break and they're from different countries, but like if I do exercises specifically to share certain, like, okay, in your country, what does a workday look like? Or how do you approach conflict in your country? Or if you have socializing, how do you socialize in your country? You know, everybody's going to start having different opinions, but I noticed that if you don't ask these questions, they withdraw to their phones. Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to say the reality, but so the classroom is diverse and we have a bunch of different people, but once you initiate those engaging questions, and I know some professors have traveled around the world, and I traveled around the world, and I know some of the differences, then it becomes very interesting when people really share how they socialize, what they feel is important, even like bedtimes. Some countries, they go to bed like 2, 3 in the morning. Some go to bed at 9 or 10. So I think it's really important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. So
I would add though that you know, diverse and inclusive classrooms help to broaden the learning success of each individual student.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually key for inclusive classrooms. One of the things that we need to keep in mind is that we need to make sure that we give room to our students to expand perceptions about their own and other cultures. They need to know that we can embrace those cultural differences. It also, inclusive classrooms help them broaden attitudes. So they are more open-minded, they're less judgmental, and they are more curious about and tolerant about ambiguity, and they realize that actually this experiences with different cultures and different languages and people different from them is actually a lifelong learning experience. Also, it is shown by the research that actually it helps cognitive skills. So interaction with people from different cultural backgrounds can actually help you think differently. And it can actually help you open up to a different way of reasoning and arguing. Also, we're talking about communication skills, which is very important, and actually intercultural communication skills it's somehow part of one of our institutional learning outcomes. So students learn how to express their ideas and thoughts in a language and manner that a diverse audience can understand and respond to. So this is actually part of our jobs as professors. We need to make sure that the way we communicate in the classroom is culturally responsive, is a culturally responsive one. So we make sure that students know that whatever they say needs to be understood by other students, for other classmates from different backgrounds. And one that maybe not, we don't think much of it, but it's really, really important, is that we need to keep, why are our students learning here at Westcott University? Because they want to be ready to get to work, because they want to have the necessary tools to go to the workforce and be successful. And the way to do so is by helping them face different languages, ethnicities, behaviors, that help them to have a bigger picture of the world. And the only way to do so is by providing them with an inclusive classroom. And as one of the professors said, sorry that I didn't read the name, we have to be proactive. As professors, we need to be proactive, and we need to make sure that we provide our students with that opportunity to get to know students with, or to embrace the idea and foster inclusion in the classroom. Now, there are many ways to make sure that our classrooms are inclusive. Let me see, I only have 10 minutes, so I'm gonna try to make it very fast. First, we need to plan for interaction. Again, we need to be proactive. Just the idea of, oh, I want to be inclusive is not enough. Or asking students, where are you from? Are you white? Are you black? Are you Latino? That goes beyond that. We need to make sure that students interact with each other. And we need to make sure that we do it in a way that it provides opportunity for different types of conversations. So one of the things that you can do, let me just use the pointer, is assign groups. Instead of just, okay, everyone gets together, whoever you want to work with. Make sure that you assign groups with people who are different so they get to know each other. Plan interactive activities and lectures. And design assignments to include peer feedback. Peer feedback has been researched a lot, and it shows that actually it helps intercultural communication to take place in a respectful way. Now, also you need to create environments for interaction. So my question to you is, how can we create that environment? What do we educators need to do to make sure that our students have the necessary tools in the classroom for interaction?
First of all, your class needs to be, sorry.
This is Professor Sotilio. I would just say that creating just one thing is to create a safe zone. So if we're talking about, like, say, human development, and you're talking about sexuality, just to give an example, talking about how your, how maybe a student can, within an assignment, talk about their sexuality or the sexual preferences. If they decide to divulge that information, or maybe saying it beforehand, being proactive, this is a safe environment. Anything that you say here should stay, within the classroom. And that gives the students an opportunity to be open and to be flexible and to learn more about each other. So just like using those words, I've used it on a slide, like safe zone. It is used in the LGBTQI community, but anyone could use it, and everyone can identify it as a place where students can be free and talk about what they need to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Professor. Anyone else?
I think in the classroom, as a teacher, we have to feel them the same level as a professor. Professor does not need to be just lecturing. It needs to be like a round table or seminar style. In that case, everyone gonna be engaged to communicate and talk and share the thoughts.
Absolutely, thank you so much. So we're going to move on here, and I'm gonna give you a few tips on how to create environments for interaction. As you said before, we need to create a safe space, and that means allow space for mistakes, mispronunciations, and we are not all native speakers. So I'm very sure that students are doing their best to communicate in the language, in the target language. So learn the names and pronunciation and create or ask for name tags. It's so important that we learn how to pronounce your student's name correctly. Let students know the best way to contact you or ask questions. And I'm saying this because, or I'm advising this because sometimes in some cultures, it's not appropriate to talk to the professor one-on-one. So they prefer just to send an email, or we need to make sure that we provide enough ways to for students to contact you. Don't assume everyone is comfortable raising their hand in class. So sometimes students do want to talk, but because of their personality, which is different to other people, they don't want to raise their hand. So we need to find ways to make sure that we include everyone. Spend sufficient time on introductions and establishing rapport in the first class. That's really important. It will help you get to know your students. It will help them feel like there's a learning community in the classroom. You need to explain, actually, when we talk about language, we need to explain a little bit of cultural jargon and be wary of using too many idioms. You need to speak clearly. And as a non-native English-speaking student as well, I would say that that's very, very important. Making sure that the language that you use in the classroom is clear enough for everyone who doesn't have English as an L1 or first language. Now, we need to support interaction as well. And for that, you have to invite students to suggest topics and examples and case studies from their home country. So every time, and I think we do that pretty well, at least at the MATSO program. I'm really proud of our program, so that's why I bring up this example, but we do that a lot. We have research journal articles from all over the world, and we make sure that every time we ask students a question or we want them to give examples from their own perspective, from their own home country. And I think that's really, really, really important because first of all, it actually gives practicality to whatever we are learning. And also it gives them the feeling that, you know what, my culture is also important. And whatever it's done in my home country, it's worth revising and discussing. Also, use nonverbal techniques such as thumbs up or whatever, just in case you're not speaking clearly, just to make sure that students understand. Now, in class discussion, pick students at random to answer questions, maybe from the easier questions to warm up. And when delivering instructions, that's really important. Again, I'm thinking about my own experience as a language learner. I started learning English when I was around 19, so it wasn't that easy. And I remember instructions were like the most difficult part for me. So when delivering instruction, please give your students time to translate. It is fair to use your home language as a resource for learning in the classroom. And clarify expectations of class participation from the start and provide examples. Now, other ways to support interaction, it's important that we do not base the scores that we give to our students only on how verbally active they are. Because we have students from different cultures, and in some cultures, speaking in the classroom is not polite. And because it feels like they're drawing their attention to them. So we need to make sure that we provide students with different ways to be actively involved in the classroom. And it's important to use interactive written activities, for example, the DQs that we have on GAPS every week, so as to track students' participation and give them opportunity to voice their opinions, engage and contribute. Again, taking their own cultural and home country background in consideration. And it's important to encourage students to ask questions. And again, if we create a safe environment for them, then it will be easy for them to ask questions because they know that they won't be taken as ignorant or anything, but they know that this is a learning community, that we are here to learn from each other and to share our differences and our similarities. And provide students with group work resource. It's important to teach them, whether we believe that they should know how to work in groups, but it's important not only to be able to set them up in different groups, for them to learn, but also to teach them how to work in groups, which are so diverse. Now, it's important also to engage with subject knowledge. And for that, you have to move past pronunciation mistakes and focus on the topic or the subject. Again, use different international example scenarios that students can relate to, and that's important. We at Westcliff have the flexibility to go to our program chair and say, hey, can I use this? And then it's, we have that flexibility to bring to our classroom and to our classes more resources for our students. So we should take advantage of that. We should also be able to introduce and incorporate different types of content, visual, auditory, so as for students with different learning styles, if that's really that exists, make them sure that they have all those opportunities to engage with the content. Apply real-world cases to theoretical content and let students find their own examples. Again, let your students have a more dynamic, interactive role in your classroom by asking them to bring examples of it from their own culture and even in their language, in their home language. So it's important if you want to give them a quiz beforehand, so you know your students well and you know exactly what is it that you need to provide them. That's also possible. It's important also to, sorry that I'm pretty much rushing. I'm just looking at the time and we're past the time. So I promise I will be fast. It's also important to develop a reflective approach. And that means that we need to understand that whatever we do in the classroom comes from our teaching philosophy. It comes from the way we see education, we see learning and teaching, and we see diversity, equity, and inclusion. So for example, we were talking about the cell phone. You might see your student engaged in a cell phone, but maybe what you think it is a student off the task if a student translating, or if a student looking for an answer in Google, as we just did 10 minutes ago. So also when developing a reflective approach, we should ask students to reflect on different views or understanding expressed in class, get students to reflect in different ways. Maybe some like to keep a blog, some others like speaking, some others like just going a little bit more academic. So give students room for being themselves as long as they accomplish the learning outcome. And it's important, and I think we do that very well at Westcliff. We ask students about their expectations at the beginning and at the end of the session. And we always ask them, and did you achieve those expectations? And that data actually gives us lots of information in terms of what needs to be done to improve the program so as to make it more inclusive and diverse. Now, we also need to foster communities of learners. And I think, again, we do this pretty well at Westcliff. We have the Gap, but we also have social media, and we engage with students in every possible way. So it's important to foster a community of learners, to integrate student mentoring. So we have small groups, so we can do that, or in-class learning partners. So pair them up so as they learn from each other. And also use Gap or discussion questions, collaborative activities to create online learning communities. Any other ways that we can foster communities of learners?
Yes, I would add to your support the interaction in terms of our roles as leaders in the classroom. I would definitely say that one thing that needs to be done is to talk about the elephant in the room. So if somebody, just for an example, one student microaggresses against another student, for example, not saying anything as a leader would not be the right thing to do. Addressing it obviously in a professional way and then bringing it up to a higher up if it needs to be done like right away. And I think that supports the interaction, that slide that you showed.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree. Now I have a couple of questions for you. Yes, so we know how to make our classrooms inclusive. At least we have a few tips. But how diverse and inclusive do you think your classes are? For real, actually are? And what do you do to facilitate a more inclusive classroom? At Westcliff, again, please try to think and contextualize your answer to Westcliff. Are your classes really diverse and inclusive? Anyone?
When I had a larger class size, I made them, well, I mean, it might sound simple, but I made them choose a new place to sit every week. So it wasn't like they were congregating with the same students, so that they can, then have that interaction. And I'd make them get up, do activities around the classroom so that they're not just talking to me, the professor of the class, but they're interacting with each other.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful idea. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
As you said, we have to remember students' name, pronounce correctly. What I do is, as soon as they come into the classroom, I am putting the first, second, third names on the board. So each day, students come different time each week to the class. So that students can be first day is number 1, second day is number 5, etc. So when I'm gonna divide them to the small groups, they already change each week for the small group exercises.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's also an excellent idea. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Yes. Usually in the first meeting, the first week, usually I ask the student to introduce themselves. Just not only to introduce by names, also by where are they from. The point is different subjects. As an example, talking about strategic management, just I'm asking them when they introduce themselves, where are they from, to provide examples from their countries. So in this way, we can share different examples, not only giving examples about the businesses here in the United States, but also they can share some examples from their country. And in this way, we can just talking about different viewpoint, how the student they feel. For example, the strategy that was implemented or is implemented in their countries, comparing with other organizations here in the United States. So in this way, I think we can just share different examples. The student, they can evaluate the situation based on their viewpoint, based on their culture, how they evaluate the situation. So this is how I just use to make or include the students with their viewpoint regardless their countries, or how to discuss the situation considering the diversity.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Nino. Okay, so I'm going to give you, I'm going to take a couple of minutes to give you some tips and tricks to facilitating a more inclusive classroom. So all of those ideas are wonderful, and actually they have to do with what I'm going to say. So you have to incorporate less commonly heard points of view in the lesson. Again, learn how to say your students' names. Educate students on why their language matters, why their language speak, and that the way they say things might hurt or might be a little bit, might be sensitive for other people. This is a really nice one that I actually saw from research. Use comics with different types of letters for the people who are dyslexic. Offer your PowerPoints to students, and different reading selections. Teach materials in different ways. Don't force students to speak, but make sure whoever's not speaking too much, so as to give them a bit of room to speak. And consider your students' lives and backgrounds when teaching. So plan activities for your students to get to know each other better. Keep in mind where they come from. Plan activities for them to show and appreciate each other. If you cannot use, at least use documents in your students' primary language if possible. Help students identify their own learning outcomes. And as we're doing today, use your professional development days to gain more diversity and inclusion training. As professors, we know that teaching is ongoing learning. So I'm going to stop here because time is up. But I'm going to finish with this, the 4 best practices around diversity and inclusion in higher education. And I think that we at Westcliff University are working actually really strongly towards meeting all those 4. Be a strong advisor, recruit diverse employees, provide education and training, and assess frequently. So we are going to post this webinar on the LITE Center website, and you will have here. We will also post this presentation, so as for you to have all the resources that we found helpful for you to be able to provide your students with a more diverse and inclusive classroom. So thank you so much for attending this webinar. You will find the other webinars that we have had previously, and this on the LITE Center website, which is lite.westcliff.edu. And there we have lots of resources that you cannot miss. So we invite you to join and to visit this website. So thank you so much. And we have already planned the 2019 professional development calendar from the LITE Center. But if you feel like you want to present something, a development session, so please contact us and let us know that, because we're more than happy to help you set up a webinar or a recorded presentation for this. So thank you so much. And before I give the floor to Jennifer, sorry, Jennifer, before I forget, I'm going to place on the chat a link with the survey link, okay? And this is just for you to complete your experience. Tell us about your experience with this webinar, in what ways we can improve continuous professional development. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to this panel. I do want to open up some time for discussion, but I know that due to time, some of you do have other commitments. So at this point, if you do need to go, just a little bit of housekeeping, this will go. It is one of our LITE Center compensated sessions, so you will go ahead and put this on there. We'll send out a follow-up email with the specific information to that. And so at this point, if you would like to stay and ask a few questions to our panel member, that would be great. If you do have to go, that will be fine as well. So thank you for attending today, and I hope to see you at some of the next sessions.
Professor Hiroshiki and Professor Suij-Ojeda, the link is not working.
Okay, for the PD survey.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
I'll look into it.
There's a Y missing, I think, at the end. It just says serve with the E.
Let me see. Maybe it was a typo. Let me check.
The first link is working when you sent it the first time. That one's fine. It was 5:27 is when it was first sent.
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry. Yes. That's it. Sorry. A Y is missing. Yeah. Sorry about that. Thank you for letting us, for checking.
I just added it on to the bad link page, and that works.
So do you have any questions for any of us from the panel?
No questions for me. I just want to let you know that this was long overdue. I am so excited. I am so thrilled for everything that the EDI committee has done to put together this panel, and thank you so much. Really, it's been very informative, and I love the interaction, so great job.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, well, if there are no questions.
No question, but comment, if you don't mind. I think it was awesome presentation as always, and thank you all of you guys, including Professor Hiroshiki. And I think we need to do this often.
Lovely.
Yeah. So Ev, I'd like to, in the absence of no other questions from people, I'd like to revisit some of the questions that Dr. McKinney posed in the chat box, because I think that they, there was in the chat, there was discussion of a follow-up workshop, which I think is absolutely on point, because the questions that Dr. McKinney posed were actually, and that were posed by a couple others, are huge questions that we could really discuss for at least an hour. But I'd like to at least touch on them so that they're not hanging out there completely. So I have made note of them. I just want you all to know that we are aware that these are really big issues that are at play. We're not just going to give them a cursory answer and leave it go. Please feel free to contact us individually if you'd like to discuss things further. So I'll read Dr. McKinney's most recent question. And then if you'd like to weigh in and let's have a quick discussion about it, that would be really great. He wrote, if a female Asian student who's been taught through her culture to be quiet and non-questioning comes to our American culture for a short period of time, say 2 to 4 years, is it appropriate to try and encourage that student to accept our culture of social verbal participation and then return to her culture with a changed attitude about her place in her culture? Discuss.
I don't think that the person doesn't need to change the culture, but can be partially or somehow adapt the culture also in addition to our own culture. That doesn't mean the person comes to our own country, it's going to be changed or ruin own culture. So adaptation is always good. Being multicultural always effective.
I would agree with some of those comments. However, I've seen some friends who have studied in the US for many years, and they've returned to their countries and they felt like they had a disconnect. They didn't belong where they came from, but they didn't know how to go back to that way. So I think it is something that we do need to consider with in regards to not really imposing, but adding maybe, but not. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that one, but I've seen it a couple times.
I am myself multicultural. I am Persian. I was born and raised in Soviet Union. It became Uzbekistan. I've been in many different countries, and I live in the United States. Before I moved to California, I lived in New York area 10 years. So everywhere I adapt myself. So I think being multicultural, it's always helpful. However, you don't need to forget, or you don't need to get against your natural culture. It's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Dr. Sherm. I think for me, this is actually a really difficult question because I just for as much as I was raised by a German family, but it was here in the US, it was here in California. When I went to Germany, I lived there for most of my 20s. And when I came back as a 30-year-old, I didn't know how to assimilate back into California society. Those are relatively similar cultures, right? And I came into a safe space and I came into a home myself. You know, I came right directly back into family. That's something I think that the question that I think I would pose that we should think about is like adaptation really is a change, regardless of whether we're adding, you know, from my perspective, right? Adding is always good, but is it? I think is just something I'd like us to just think about a little bit more critically.
I do agree with you, Professor Sorensen. I think we should add some of these issues into our courses because there are the answer to the question is it appropriate to encourage the student to accept our culture? It's appropriate during the class, I think, for the materials, but I don't think it's like to change for the student to change her personality or who she is. Maybe it's not appropriate, but that might be confusing for the student to know that, okay, you behave a certain way in maybe Western business or Western whatever you're doing, and then your personality is your personality. You should always be true to yourself, but that's not part of any curriculum. I think it's part of a dialogue. It's more of an offshoot conversation. So when I teach the curriculum, because I teach leadership, organizational behavior, I always say this is a caveat of Western theory. It's based on Western experiments and theory. So that is a loaded question. Maybe we should have another seminar about that. But that is really important because you don't want to deflate. They're really excited when they learn everything, and then when they try to implement it and it doesn't work, sometimes they get depressed because they're saying, well, I learned all this, but I don't understand why it's not working in this culture that's not supporting me back into the Asian culture. So yeah, we should definitely look at it.
I agree. What I really liked about what Dr. that was only half of Dr. McKinney's
right
actually. So just to kind of follow up that quick discussion with this second example, says, on the other hand, there are male students who are accustomed to bullying others and who do not want to accept the responsibility of being nice to others, right? I myself as a female professor have been bullied by male students. At Westcliff, this antisocial attitude is something we don't and should not accept in or outside the classroom. And I like the juxtaposition of these two examples, because in the latter half, like, it's my instinct that we would all be in very strong agreement that we should change those behaviors of that second example, but we're more on the fence about that first example. And I'd like us to just kind of reflect on what the differences are between those two examples, or are there differences, and how we interact with that kind of change and how that aligns with our values.
I guess I'm just kind of, you brought that, and it comes up and I'm like, oh, I don't know, because I really did think that one was like, oh, acceptable or not acceptable. And so I guess I think almost, well, where is that student coming from? And is bullying even acceptable there? Or is that type of attitude or behavior acceptable? Or are we trying to conform someone into this? I don't know. I guess in both situations, we could ask ourselves, what, I lost my train of thought now. Go ahead, I'll come back. I remembered. So if we are thinking about students coming from another culture or another country to the US, for example, do they knowingly come into a different situation, and are they expected to follow the norms of that place? Whereas if I go to another country, I feel like I'm expected to follow certain norms of that place, or do we not? That's where I was going with that.
Well, actually, to answer this question, Professor Hirashiki, for example, for me, as back home, I learned about the American culture from movies. And that's how I was introduced to the culture. So this helped me to understand a little bit about the culture, and not only American movies, about Russian movies, also about French movies. So it's very important how well these people are, do they know what to expect? You're right. Do they know what's the unknown? What's going to happen? How they gonna, understand or behave or understand other people, or for us to understand them also. So that would be a good idea, that if we also try to interact with these students and ask a little bit about their backgrounds. And like Dr. Nino, she said that she asked them to give an example about how to implement certain model in their country. So that way it will encourage also students to understand this culture as well and other people's culture.
I really enjoy your point, Professor. And the movies are really important. When you watch them, you know how people act. But I think that some of the students don't watch movies, and so they don't know really what to expect. I think they come in and they're excited, but what happens is, it falls into stereotypes where, like, the Asian females are generally quiet, and the Europeans are generally more talkative. So I'm trying to figure that out. I don't have an answer, but then you have the classroom where you always have the people that talk, that are always talking because that's part of their culture. And then you have the Asian side where they want to talk, they know the content, but they're timid to talk. And so I'm constantly always open for tips or seeing if anybody has shared experiences. So what I don't want to happen in 8 weeks is that the same people talk all the time, I guess, is what I'm, you know, and that's what I try not to do through forced group exercises. But how do you change people's, like I said, how do you change their personality, or how do you file, okay, this is how you act in this society, like this is a movie, you act this way, right?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, are you done?
Go. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. The thing is that, for example, why don't you reverse it? And first of all, when I said self-awareness, what do you know about yourself in order for you to understand the others? What are you missing that you don't understand about the other people? So what I do, I usually, for example, when I teach and I have Indians, you know, students from India, I did watch a lot of movies. And then I picked up the names of the actresses, the name of the movies. So I said, hey, do you remember that person, that actress or that actor there in India? So that way I can connect with them, you know, how to do, like, for example, there's a movie, it's called Corporate in India. So I watched it, and then I use it a lot with the students. And I tell them, oh, did you see that movie? This is very good movie. It applies in that model, or this is how we, you know, I use it as an example. So that's why also not only know about the American culture, but also know about other people's cultures, so that we interact and they feel that you are one of them. And in fact, one person, he said, oh, are you from that country, that city, which was in India? So to that extent that they thought, I'm in India, I'm from there, because I was able to share with them about the history of India. I was able to share with them with other situations or events. So they thought that I'm one of them. So this is how I encourage them to communicate or to interact, so they feel that they're not left alone. And this is where the inclusion part comes. So I will encourage them to interact, and I will get examples from their country. So that way they feel that they are included. We're not talking about the American culture only. We're talking about the whole world, the global world, because now, you know, there is no boundaries, and it's a small village now, and everybody knows about every other people. So that's why we are like one family, one part, like one family. So it's one community. So I treat it as one community instead of treating it from, this is from there or from that country. So maybe if you know, or we, you know, if you know about other people's cultures, so then you can incorporate it.
Yeah, but can I add something?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's not about changing anyone. That's the first thing that we have to keep in mind. It's about embracing the difference. It's not easy. It's actually very challenging. It sounds beautiful, but how difficult it is to put it in practice. I think I do believe, and I do believe that students need to adjust to the culture they go to. They do. We also need to be able to respect some of their differences. But there are things that me as a professor, and I'm speaking for myself, and that's going to be my opinion. There are things that I can, even though come from different cultures, they're not acceptable. For example, I have heard that in certain cultures, students don't read. Oh, they don't read, but if they're in an online program, how am I supposed to do? So they do need to learn how to read if they want to join a program in an American university, or if they want to get anything done academically. So there are things that we need to accept, and there are others that we do need to find ways, I'm not going to say to change, but to face those challenges. But one of the things that I wanted to say is that, yeah, it's not about changing anyone, because that's not...
I just, this is Professor Cecilia. I just want to say that I agree with you 100% that you aren't supposed to change any of the students. But one thing I do want to mention is that the Westcliff University does an amazing job with the syllabus. And irregardless, if we're talking about behavior versus thought, we're just talking about behavior or problematic behavior. One of the ways to frame that is to really be proactive and go into the syllabus at the first class. And part of the syllabus has a code of conduct. And it's just a bunch of words, but when you really describe and give examples of what those bunch of words mean, any student from any culture can really understand that. giving like clear examples of what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in terms of what's respectful and what's not respectful. And then as long as you have that covered, people are free to have that safe space to be themselves, because they do have that frame like, listen, this is an opportunity for us to learn and grow together. However, there are some things that we need to do together to make it work. And so I really focus on the code of conduct, and I think that's very helpful for me. And it helps the students have a better frame as well.
These are all really great comments, and I wish that we could spend 10 hours today discussing them, because I think that this is something that we're all really interested in and learning more about this topic. So I really want to work with the EDI committee to come up with a part 2 for this session.
Definitely.
Because there is an interest and a need in it, and I think we can all take a lot about what we're learning from these and apply it directly to our classes and benefit our students and those who work with us, work around us. So on this last note, we will send out this presentation. We will send out the recording, and I'm going to ask for some of the specific slides to be turned into a PDF so we can send those out as well. In March, our next session will actually be an asynchronous, synchronous calibration activity through the LITE Center. Then in May, we're going to have the topic on the flipped classroom approach. And that also many of these topics will tie into, you'll see how they could connect with these underlying themes of thinking about our students and thinking about what they come to our classroom with. So I thank you so much for your participation today. And again, it is a struggle that I'm cutting this discussion off, but I'd rather think about and have the time to devote to this rather than those who do have to rush for other commitments. So thank you for attending, and I look forward to our part 2.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday. Bye.
And if there's any, if there's another space in the EDI committee, I'd love to join if there is. But you can.
Oh, wonderful.
Come August, all the positions come open, so we'd love to have you.
Okay, thank you.
Wonderful.
We would love to have you, Dr. Shu.
Okay, thank you. I'd love that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.